In this video, I'm going to show you how to install this interior door. And if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. The channel is all about building your own house, saving a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get a notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask in return for making this video. So installing a door isn't that hard, but I'm going to walk you through it. A couple things I wanted to mention to you before we get started is if we take a look at this door, this is what's called a right-hand door. So in order to determine if it's left or right hand, you stand from the outside of the door, and whatever side the hinges are on, that's the handing of the door. So in this case, the hinges are on the right side, so this is a right-handed door. And also, a lot of times interior doors, you can get them in what's called a split jamb, to where the jamb comes apart in the middle, and then you place it together with the trim on it. And this door is not like that. I found out that it's better to install the trim later because when they staple it on in the factory, it's not always perfect. So in this case, we got a standard finger jointed board as the jamb, and then we got what's called door stop going around the door that's going to help the door stop. In order to get the door to stop flush with the drywall, I first just tack on just a little piece of trim up top. You don't have to use trim, it can be any type of board, and it's just going to act as a stop so that the door doesn't go past the drywall. And one nail is fine just to hold it into place. I'm going to use 2 1/4 hinge screws, and these are colored black because the color of the hinges are black, so that way they match. So I'm going to get these on hand. I'm going to put them in my tool bag before I place the door up to where it's going to be installed. So now I'm going to place the door right into the opening and butt the top of it against that board we placed here that acts as a stop. Now that we got it into place, what we're going to do is just go ahead and pull up on the door and open it and use the door slab to hold the door up. I'm now going to remove this center screw in the top hinge and leave the 2 that's on the top and bottom. And that's where I'm going to replace it with the longer hinge screw. I'm just going to put it in enough to get it started. Now I'm going to pull it tight to that stop. And make sure we're relatively flush against the drywall. Everything looks really good. So I'm going to drive this hinge screw in. And I'm not going to over tighten it, just enough to hold the door into place. Now that the door is being held by that one single screw, I'm just going to get a general idea of how this door is setting before I go any further. So I'm going to take my level and put it right against this jamb. And I'm looking, and it looks like the bottom needs to come out in order to make it plumb. And also I'm going to shut the door, just see what the reveal shows and see if it shows the same thing. So if we take a look here, and it does. As you can see, we've got a pretty big gap here. So that tells me the bottom needs to be kicked inwards toward the door in order to help shut that gap. So that's all adding up. So I'm now going to put shims down this bottom hinge in order to bring this slab up. I'm now going to take some shims and this Wonder Bar, and any of these tools and supplies can be found in my Amazon store. The link is in the description below. So the first thing I'm going to do is just put the Wonder Bar back here behind that hinge and just pry out just a little bit and take some shims and place back there. Just kind of get a good start here. It doesn't have to be the perfect amount for now, just enough to get started. And now we're going to double check with our level and that gap that was up above the top of the door. Somehow my mic dropped right here, but what I was trying to explain was the gap was bigger here towards the end of the slab. So what I ended up doing was opening up the door and checking the jamb again, and it showed it needed kicked out more at the bottom again. So what I did to compensate for it is I put a hinge screw in that top hinge very tight, so I tightened it up all the way, so that drew that slab over even more. Now that I tightened that hinge side up all the way at the very top and I have those 2 shims in, now I'm going to check and see what it looks like after I did all that. And it does look much better up here, nothing wrong with that. And it's setting nice and plumb. So now I gotta secure all of the hinges. The shims that I have placed in here temporarily are not gonna stay there. Whenever they're placed together like this, it causes a significant wedge on this side of the door jamb, and then when you put screw in, it'll kind of tilt it a little bit. So the best way to do it is to have the shims like this. But whenever you're trying to get it together temporarily, it's harder to do it like this. But now that we know it's going to be sitting there, I'm going to install the shims, one from one side of the door and one from the other, in order to create an even plane. And now we can remove the ones we put in there temporarily And as you can see, these shims are right in the center of this hinge because that's where we're going to put a screw into to hold everything into place. I now have the door open so I can place a screw right here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and get the screw started. And what I definitely need to make sure I do is get the door jamb flush with the drywall at the bottom because we don't have a stop down here like we did up above. So this needs pulled in some, and right there looks good. I'm using the shim as a straight edge. And that looks good there, so I'm going to tighten this screw up. I'm now going to do the middle hinge the same way. We're going to place our shim right into where the screw is going to be hitting, and then go on the other side and push it back through. Now I'm just going to drive a screw right here to hold it into place. And now the hinge side of the door is secured. Now that the hinge side is secured, we got to address the latch side. As you know, there's nothing holding this side yet. And what we got to do is eyeball the reveal that is this crack right here between the jamb and the door. That's called a reveal. So if you look down it, it looks actually really good right where it's setting. Doesn't need adjusted too much, but as you can see, you can shim this to adjust it accordingly. So all we got to do is place shims tight right where we need it, and then place nails in order to hold it into place, similar to what we did on the hinge side. We know we placed that board up top to stop the jamb from going out past the drywall, so I'm just going to slide it right up to where it stops. Place my shims in here to where it keeps the jamb nice and square, so about like that. And I'm going to this time use my trim nailer in order to secure it. So right where it is now looks good, so I'm going to place a couple nails. And that's going to hold those shims and that jamb into place. And now we got to address the middle. I like to place shims right here to where the latch is going to be for the door. And as we know, the reveal looks good right where it's setting. So what I'm going to do is do the same process. That way we have a nice looking finish when it's all said and done. This bottom is actually sitting good where it's at. It's hitting the plate at the bottom of the door, so it actually does not require shims. Make sure we're flush with the drywall, just like all the other ones, and we're really good there. And just tack a couple nails into place. In order to break these shims, an easy method is to just take a utility knife, score down the shim first, and then break it. But if you don't want to do it like that, you can also use an oscillating tool just to cut them off. Now that the door is totally anchored, it's time to trim out around the door. And in order to do so, I always do the sides, then the top. Whenever I do my door trim, I like to have about an 1/8 inch reveal. So I usually just eyeball about an 1/8, maybe a little bit over. So that way we have the same look around the whole door. So I want to measure right up to this mark, and right here's where it's going to line up. So I'm going to just take my tape measure up to that mark first. And what we got is, we need to cut our first piece 81 inches and a 60, so 81 and 1/16. And then we're going to measure the other side. Now I'm going to come over on this side, do the same thing, guesstimate about an 1/8 inch or so, measure up to that line. This measurement here is about the same, 81 and an 1/8 inch, so we'll cut both pieces. The door casing that I'm going to be installing is this 2 1/4 Colonial, and I got a miter saw here. That's what I'm going to be doing all my cuts on. So what I got to do is just lay my trim right up onto the miter saw and then measure the length of the short point. The long point is the long end of the 45, and then the bottom point is the short point. So we're going to do 81 and a 1/16 to the short point. So we're going to measure right off the bottom, 81 to 1/16, and I'm going to make a mark right there onto the measurement. And now I'm going to turn my saw to a 45-degree angle. So right down here, get it on 45 degrees. And it has an auto stop there, and that looks good. Now you got to hold your trim really tight to the fence of the saw and line up to that mark and just cut it right to that point. So this is the first piece of trim, and now we got to cut the other side for the other side of the door. I'm now going to place the casing that I just cut right up to those marks that we made. As you can see, everything lines up really well. Now I'm just going to take my finish nailer and tack a nail right here into the wall. And then I want to tack one into the jamb of the door. And that looks really good. Now we just keep nailing it and keeping the same reveal going down this trim. As you work the casing down, you can move it left or right to get your reveal here looking perfect. So right there looks good. You nail this about every 12 to 16 inches. In order to cut this piece, we need to get a measurement from the point of this piece to the point of this piece. So in order to do so, just hook the tape on the one, measure to the end of the other. We got 34 7/8 from long point to long point. Now that that piece is cut the length, we're going to place it into place, and that looks really good. And now what we got to do is nail it similar to how we nailed the sides. We're just going to put one in each point here. And we're going to nail it right into the jamb. To trim the other side of the door, we got to remove our stop that we placed in here at the beginning of the video in order to hold the door flush with the drywall. Looks like one of the nails stuck into the wood. Now we trim this side out just like we did the other side. Any nails that did not sink all the way, all I'm going to do is take a punch and punch them and countersink them into the trim. After the trim is installed, I'm now going to take this paintable caulk and place it into the crease here and also a little bit in this 45. So in order to do so, I got a slight angle at the end of the caulk gun, and I'm going to place it right into that crease and just fill it up with the caulk. Run a little bit in this little creep, and then I'm just going to smooth it out with my finger like so. Pretty simple stuff here. I'm going to place just a little bit in this 45. The 45 looks pretty good, but this helps give it a nice finish here. In order to address these nail holes, I like to use what's called spackling. The spackling will not shrink as much as the caulk, so I will not put the caulk in the nail holes if I can avoid it. And all we got to do this is just take a little bit on our finger and just smear it right into those nail holes. Pretty simple idea here. As you can see, everything is patched up here and ready for paint. Another important thing I wanted to mention is if you're fighting with a door and you can't get the reveal looking great, sometimes you will have to cut a little bit off the bottom of the jamb, either on the hinge side or on the other side, because your floor is not perfectly level sometimes, and you gotta do that. So I just wanted to throw this into this video to make it full and complete. Now all we gotta do is place a doorknob on here and this door is ready to go. If you need to know how to trim out a window like this, check out this video. It'll help you out.